Dr. Randy Carter had dedicated his life to the pursuit of knowledge, pushing the boundaries of what humanity understood about the universe. As a renowned scientist and astronaut, his achievements in space exploration were unparalleled. But his latest mission was unlike anything he had ever undertaken: a quest to retrieve a mysterious cosmic mud rumored to possess extraordinary properties. Legends claimed it could heal, regenerate, and even reverse the effects of aging. Humanity had always dreamed of conquering time, and Randy believed he was on the brink of turning that dream into reality. On the morning of his mission, Randy stood at the launch pad, the rising sun casting long shadows across the ground. Excitement coursed through him, making sleep the night before impossible. As the spacecraft roared to life, he felt the familiar thrill of venturing into the unknown. This mission, however, carried significant risks. The mud was located in a remote and largely uncharted sector of space. Still, Randy was determined to see it through. With a final wave to his team, he boarded the spacecraft and launched into the skies, Earth shrinking beneath him. The journey through space was quiet and surreal, the silence interrupted only by the hum of the spacecraft. Stars streaked past as hours turned into days. Randy's anticipation grew with each passing moment. When he finally arrived at the designated coordinates, he found himself in a desolate, shadowed region of space. The atmosphere felt heavy, almost oppressive, as if the area itself carried an ancient secret. Landing on the barren surface, Randy stepped out, his protective gear shielding him from the alien environment. The ground beneath his boots was slick with a viscous substance that faintly shimmered under the beam of his flashlight. Carefully, he began collecting samples, noting the mud's strange colors, deep emerald greens and rich purples that seemed to shift and flow as if alive. As he sealed another sample jar, a sound shattered the silence, a faint, haunting scream that sent chills down his spine. He froze, scanning the area with wide eyes. No one else was supposed to be here. The scream echoed again, louder this time, urging him to follow it. His flashlight cut through the darkness as he made his way toward the source. After a short distance, he stopped abruptly, his breath hitching. A figure lay partially submerged in the mud, a woman. Her body shimmered unnaturally, as though the mud was a part of her. "Are you okay?" Randy called out, approaching cautiously. The woman raised her head, her violet eyes brimming with fear and pain. "Please, help me," she whispered. "The mud, it's holding me. Be careful." Randy hesitated, his mind racing. He had been handling the mud for hours, and it had shown no signs of danger. Yet here she was, trapped as if fused to it. "I'll help you," he said firmly, kneeling beside her. "Don't touch it," she cried, panic in her voice. Startled, Randy paused but refused to abandon her. Gripping her arms with determination, he pulled hard, freeing her from the mud's grasp. She collapsed into his arms, breathing heavily. Up close, she looked otherworldly. Her skin glowed faintly, smooth and luminous, while her violet eyes sparkled with a depth that seemed infinite. "Thank you," she murmured. "I'm Rua." "Randy Carter," he replied, his voice steady. "Let's get you back to the ship." Helping her to her feet, Randy guided Rua to the spacecraft, storing the jars of mud samples before turning his attention back to her. He handed her a cloth, but as she wiped her skin, the mud refused to come off, clinging stubbornly as though it were a part of her. "Do you have water?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. "Not much," Randy admitted, "but once we're back on Earth, I'll get you what you need. I promise." Rua nodded, her expression softening with trust. During the journey back, they talked, sharing pieces of their worlds. Rua described her home, a place of crystalline landscapes and skies that changed colors with the seasons. She explained how her people had once been explorers, traveling the galaxies in search of knowledge, but over time, they had retreated into isolation. Randy, in turn, told her about Earth, its sprawling cities, vast oceans, and the incredible diversity of life. As they talked, he found himself drawn to her, captivated by her presence and the warmth of her laughter. When they finally landed on Earth, Randy brought Rua to his home, where she could clean herself properly. Yet even after washing, a faint shimmer remained on her skin, a reminder of her connection to the cosmic mud. In the weeks that followed, Randy and Rua grew closer. While she adapted to life on Earth, Randy immersed himself in studying the samples he had collected. The mud's regenerative properties hinted at groundbreaking possibilities for medicine and aging. but Rua's connection to the substance remained a mystery. At times, her health seemed to falter, the glow of her skin dimming before flaring back to life. Through it all, their bond deepened. Together, they dreamed of a future where their two worlds might unite, bridging the gap between the stars. And in each other, they found something more profound than any discovery, a connection that transcended the limits of space and time, a love that promised to change both their destinies forever. Her skin was impossibly smooth, nearly flawless. As Randy stared, an idea began to take shape in his mind. Could this mud work on her the way he hoped it would on humans? Voa, he asked gently, his tone a mix of curiosity and care. May I apply the mud to your face? She hesitated for a moment before nodding. If you think it will help, she said softly. Randy carefully prepared a small amount of the mud and with deliberate precision spread it across her face. He watched her closely as he worked, noting the way she began to relax under his touch, a faint smile forming on her lips. For him, the act felt oddly personal, intimate even, as though he were sharing a piece of himself with her. When he finished, he guided her to the mirror and helped her wash the mud away. The moment her reflection came into view, she gasped. Her eyes widened in amazement. Her skin was luminous, smoother than ever, radiating a youthful glow. She lifted a hand to her cheek, her voice barely above a whisper. It worked. Excitement surged through Randy. His theory was correct. This mud wasn't just a fluke. It held the power to transform lives, to usher in a new age of health and beauty. But as he looked at Voa, he realized this discovery wasn't just about science or success. It stirred something deeper within him, something he hadn't felt in years. Voa's fingers grazed the edge of a glass vial, her ethereal face glowing softly in the dim light of the lab. She turned to him with a gaze that blended curiosity and quiet admiration. Randy felt drawn to her, captivated by her presence. She wasn't merely a key to his breakthrough. She was a riddle in her own right, as boundless and mysterious as the universe she had come from. Randy, she began, her voice warm and gentle, sending a ripple of emotion through him. Why do humans desire change so much? You try to defy time, to reshape yourselves, always searching for something more, always reaching beyond the present. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I think it's because we're afraid. Time slips through our fingers, and life feels so fleeting. Maybe by holding on to beauty or youth, we feel like we're in control. Maybe we think that change will bring us closer to the happiness we're chasing. Voa nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. On my world, we once sought change too. We journeyed across stars and systems, searching for answers among the cosmos. But eventually, our leaders decided that change itself was the distraction. They taught us to look inward, to discover peace and beauty within ourselves, and to stop reaching outward. They believed the universe was a mirror, reflecting what already lies inside us. Her words sank deep into Randy's thoughts, filling him with both admiration and a twinge of sadness. Her people had turned away from exploration to seek inner serenity, while his had always pursued progress, driven by an endless hunger for more. The contrast between them was profound, and he wondered if each had a lesson the other could learn. As though sensing his thoughts, Voa placed her hand lightly on his. You know, Randy, she said softly, her voice carrying an almost fragile sincerity, I never expected to find something like this. I didn't come here for science or discovery. I came because I felt a calling, a need to experience more, to understand life beyond my world. Her words lingered in the air between them. Randy glanced at her hand resting on his, feeling its warmth seep into him. The space around them seemed to hum with unspoken emotion, a quiet, magnetic pull that felt just as powerful as the mysteries they had been uncovering. Their eyes met, and in that shared moment, a spark ignited. Randy felt a jolt, an electric charge that coursed through him, a feeling he hadn't known in years. She came from another world, yet here she was, sitting across from him, a being as intricate and vulnerable as any human. On an impulse, he picked up the vial of mud they had collected together, holding it between them. You know, he murmured, his voice barely audible, I was planning to test this on myself, but now I'm not so sure it's necessary. Voa's expression softened, a gentle smile spreading across her face. Why not, Randy? Because, he started, carefully choosing his words. There are things science can't explain, things no serum or substance could ever provide, and maybe, just maybe, those things are closer than we realize. Voa gazed at him, her eyes filled with an otherworldly wisdom he had never encountered before. Perhaps, Randy, you've already found something far more valuable than any experiment could offer. Their faces were now just inches apart, his heartbeat quickening as his logical mind struggled to catch up with the overwhelming intensity of the moment. Slowly, he reached out, his fingers grazing her cheek. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes briefly, as if savoring the warmth of his hand. The weight of their shared journey, the fragile, unspoken connection growing between them, hung in the air. In that silence, words became unnecessary. They were two souls from entirely different worlds, discovering in each other something neither had anticipated. Randy pulled her closer, feeling the soft, unfamiliar warmth of her skin and the steady rhythm of her heart, mirroring his own. In that suspended, quiet moment, he realized this was more than a collaboration, more than a pursuit of knowledge or discovery. Voa was no longer just an extraordinary encounter from a distant world. She was the missing piece he hadn't known he needed, the light he hadn't realized was absent from his life. The universe beyond them stretched endlessly, filled with mysteries and discoveries they could never fully grasp. But in each other, they had found something extraordinary, a connection so rare it felt like a miracle. And in the fragile strength of that bond, they both knew that whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together. As Randy and Voa stood there, lost in the quiet intensity of their connection, the air around them seemed to hum with a strange energy. The vial of mud still held between them began to vibrate, the liquid inside swirling unnaturally. Voa's eyes widened as the energy surged through the air, the temperature in the room rising. "Randy," she whispered, her voice laced with awe. "Do you feel that?" He nodded, unable to speak, feeling a surge of electricity pass through his body. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble, and suddenly the vial exploded in a burst of light, sending a shockwave through the room. For a moment, everything went dark. When Randy regained his senses, he found himself standing on an unfamiliar landscape. The sky above was a swirl of colors he had never seen, vibrant hues that shifted and rippled as if the very atmosphere were alive. The air smelled fresh, tinged with an alien sweetness. Voa was beside him, her eyes wide with wonder. "We're not in the lab anymore." Randy looked around, his heart racing. "Where are we? What just happened?" Before she could respond, a strange hum filled the air, and from the horizon, a massive structure began to rise, part organic, part metallic, like a living city. It towered over them, its surface pulsing with energy as though it were breathing. "That," Voa said softly, "is the gateway." "The gateway?" Randy repeated, confused. "It's a passage," she explained, "a doorway between worlds, a link to other dimensions. But it's never activated like this. Not by anyone. The serum, the mud, they must have triggered it." A voice echoed around them, not from the sky, but from the very air itself. It wasn't a voice they heard with their ears, but one that resonated in their minds, a deep, melodic tone that seemed to come from the city. "You have awakened the gatekeeper." The ground beneath them shook again as the towering structure shifted, and a figure began to emerge from it, a being made of light and shadow, shifting in form like liquid energy. Voa stepped forward, her gaze steady. "The gatekeeper," she murmured. "It's been waiting for someone to awaken it, and now it has chosen us." Randy stared at the figure, his heart pounding. "What does it want from us?" The gatekeeper's voice filled his mind again. "You have found the path. You must decide, will you continue your journey through the realms, seeking knowledge, power, and truth, or will you return to the world you know?" Randy's mind raced, and he turned to Voa, who was already looking at him, her expression unreadable. The weight of the choice pressed heavily on him. On one hand, the unknown stretched out before them, a universe filled with possibilities and discoveries beyond comprehension. On the other, there was the world he knew, with its familiar struggles and comforts. "What do you think, Voa?" he asked, his voice thick with uncertainty. She smiled, the same gentle smile that had softened her expression earlier. "I think," she said quietly, "that we've already found something extraordinary, and now we have the chance to find even more." The gatekeeper's form shimmered, as though it were waiting for their decision. Randy took a deep breath, his mind made up. He looked at Voa, and together they stepped forward, into the unknown. As they crossed the threshold, the world around them shifted. They were no longer in the landscape of vibrant skies. They were somewhere else entirely. Somewhere deeper, older, filled with secrets that only the bravest would dare to seek. And in that moment, they understood. This was no longer just a journey of science. It was a journey of the soul, one that would take them farther than either of them could have imagined. The gatekeeper's voice echoed one last time, its words a promise. You have chosen the path of discovery. You will find wonders beyond your wildest dreams. But remember this, knowledge comes at a price. Be prepared to face what lies ahead. With that, the gatekeeper faded into the ether, and Randy and Voa walked onward, their hearts filled with both anticipation and dread for the mysteries that awaited them. As Randy and Voa stepped further into the unknown, the landscape around them began to shift again. The air buzzed with energy, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to ripple, as though the very fabric of reality was bending and folding. Strange, luminous creatures flickered in and out of existence, their bodies composed of glowing particles that moved with graceful, fluid motions. They found themselves standing at the edge of a vast, shimmering lake. The water's surface was smooth, but it glowed with an ethereal light, casting reflections of distant stars in a sky that didn't seem to belong to any world they knew. It felt like time had slowed, or perhaps it had stopped altogether. "This isn't just another dimension," Randy said, his voice barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the delicate calm. "It's something deeper." Voa nodded, her gaze fixed on the lake. "It's the nexus, a convergence of all realms. Everything and nothing, past, present, future, all coexist here." Before Randy could respond, a figure emerged from the shimmering waters. It wasn't human, nor was it anything he could easily categorize. It was a being of fluid energy, its form constantly shifting, its features like ripples on water, sometimes appearing to be multiple faces at once. The entity spoke, though its voice was not spoken aloud, but felt in the mind. "You have crossed into the heart of the nexus, where all possibilities converge. Here, you can glimpse the future, witness the past, and shape your own destiny. But be warned, the nexus does not offer its gifts freely." Randy felt the weight of those words settle over him like a heavy fog. He looked at Voa, whose eyes held a deep understanding, as though she had already anticipated this moment. "What does it mean?" Randy asked, his voice trembling slightly. The being before them shifted again, becoming more distinct, the edges of its form now glowing with radiant energy. "The Nexus grants those who enter the power to reshape what is, what was, and what will be, but it comes at a cost. To wield such power, you must surrender something precious, a piece of yourself, a memory, a desire, a choice." Voa stepped forward, her expression resolute. "What do you mean by surrender?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling in her mind. The entity paused, its form rippling like water disturbed by a breeze. "The price is unique for each soul. Only you can decide what you are willing to give up to change the future. The question is not whether you are capable, but whether you are ready to pay the price." Randy's heart pounded in his chest. He felt the weight of his entire life, the choices, the regrets, the things he had never had the courage to do, pressing in on him. And yet, a part of him was drawn to the idea of rewriting his story, of stepping into a future where he could have it all. But there was something inside him that hesitated, something that told him the cost of such a gift could be more than he was willing to bear. He turned to Voa, searching her face for any sign of what she might choose. She met his gaze with calm certainty. "What are you willing to lose, Randy?" she asked quietly. "Because that's the only way forward." "You can't have it all." Randy swallowed, feeling the enormity of the choice before him. He wasn't sure what the right answer was, but he knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just a journey of discovery. It was a test of who he was, who he could become. "I'm not ready to lose anything," he said finally, his voice firm. "I don't want to pay a price I can't afford." The Nexus seemed to pulse in response, as if the very essence of reality itself were listening. The glowing figure before them flickered, and for a brief moment, the stars in the sky dimmed. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it faded, its voice echoing in their minds one final time. "Then you have chosen wisely. Not all are ready for the gift of the Nexus. Perhaps, another time, another path." The lake before them shimmered again, and the world began to warp, like a dream slowly slipping away. Randy felt his feet lifting off the ground, and in a heartbeat, they were back in the lab, the vial of mud still in his hand, no sign of the Nexus or the strange being remaining. Voa stood beside him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither spoke. "Did that really happen?" Randy asked, his voice hoarse. Voa looked at him, her smile gentle. "I think you already know the answer, Randy. The Nexus gave you a glimpse of what could be, but the choice was always yours." And with that, they stood in silence, the weight of what had just transpired settling in. There were no easy answers, no certainty, but Randy knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, he was ready to face it, with Voa by his side.